Just a few words of introduction of who Rav Kook was. Rav Kook was born 1865 and passed away 1935, living 70 years, accomplishing like 700 years. One could say that although he wasn't the founder of the religious Zionism, there were some rabbis before him that had already come up with this concept, with this philosophical Jewish idea of religious Zionism. But he was definitely, like mentioned, Rav Alkelai, Rav Kalisher, Rav Mohaliver, some big rabbis who were of the Mizrahi movement prior to Rav Kook. But definitely Rav Kook set for us the foundations, philosophical, deep discussions based on vast Torah sources, whether it will be from the Tanakh, whether from Chazal, Kabbalistic works. He knew it all. He knew it all. The religious Zionist world today, any type of version of the religious Zionist world, we have many, many versions of it, and hopefully we should live in peace with amongst each other, with one another. But any type of version really stems from Rav Kook, all based on his writings, on his work, and everyone learns it a little differently, different variations of understanding his work. His work is very deep, so the deeper you go, the more one can conclude from it. So there are different ways of viewing it, but definitely the common denominator of all those who follow Rav Kook is this idea that we are enrolled for the past 150 years. We are enrolled in the final Geulah, and I think the most important point in Rav Kook's work, if you can sum it up within the tens of thousands of pages he had written, not exaggerating, tens of thousands of pages. Most of his work hasn't come out yet, wasn't published yet. It's in all kinds of safes, in all kinds of places, and they put it out little by little. By the way, tens of thousands of pages, handwritten, with not one erased. You don't see anything erased by Rav Kook. Meaning it's something that came flowing from his neshama onto his pen or pencil. It was barely by intellectual, normal process that we all do when we write things. We think, we decide to say this, say that, we erase this, erase that. Clean, no, not one single erased word in the tens of thousands of pages. Number one, most important, say chiddush, was the fact that what you see is not really what lies behind what goes on. That's the number one concept that Rav Kook elaborated over and deepened his insight to tell us that when we look at things as they appear superficially on surface, that's not at all what really lies beneath a process, a person, nation, the world. You have to deepen your insight and see what lies behind what's visible to our eyes. And this goes in many different directions. Just for a little more of historic background, so Rav Kook was born in Poland or Lithuania. He studied mainly in Yeshivat Volozhin, the yeshiva first headed by Rav Chaim of Volozhin, the closest student of the Gra, of the Gaon of Vilna, 250 years ago, founded by Rav Chaim of Volozhin. It's the very first yeshiva of the type that we learn till today. In the time of Rav Kook, when he was studying in the Yeshivat Volozhin, the Natziv of Volozhin was the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who is very, very famous for his commentary on the TORAH, Ha'amek Davar. Besides many other books he wrote, a response called Meshiv Davar, commentary on the She'iltot of Rav Chai Gaon named Ha'amek She'ela. Many books he had written, but mainly we most familiar with the book Ha'amek Davar on the Torah. So Rav Kook studied by the Natziv of Volozhin for several years, and there he studied normal Gemara, Rishonim, Achronim, as we do when we learn in Yeshivot. And there he acquired tremendous amount of knowledge in the area of the Nigleh, of the part of Torah that's revealed, not the hidden parts of the Torah. They speak about the fact that, if I remember correctly, I don't take my word for sure, but he did something like 60 blat a day. 60 pages of Gemara a day. It's unbelievable. It's something you can't fathom. He did a lot of strenuous, hard work and hard learning in those years. Then he became not too late in his life, when he was in his mid-20s, he became a puppet rabbi of a small town in Poland, Lithuania, and was there for a few years, and then moved to another place, Boisk and Zemel, a few different small towns, small villages in the area. And then he decided that this is not real. This is not where a Jew is meant to be. This is not where the Torah is meant to be learned, and you can't really deepen your insight and feel the relationship between yourself and Hashem in Chutz La'aretz. So he decided to make Aliyah. He was born in 1865. 1904, he came to live in Israel. He was firstly made the rabbi of Yafo Shavot. Back in those days, Tel Aviv was smaller than Yafo. It is totally put around nowadays, but it was a small, tiny town. Yafo was the main town of the area. So as he got off the boat, he became the rabbi of Yafo, where he just got off the boat on the Yafo beach. He got very involved in mitzvot hakliyot ba'aretz, which is something you only fulfill in Eretz Israel. He wrote books about that as well. And here in Israel, his perspective of what's going on in our lives, changed and developed into what he began believing in, that this is part of a process of Torah redemption. And in Yafo, he was in touch. He lived in the Vet Tzedek. It's a neighborhood in Yafo. Highly recommend to tour the neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood, picturesque. His original home still exists in the Vet Tzedek, and he lived by the top Jewish thinkers of those days, mainly non-religious. If we speak about Chaim Nachman Bialik, who's living in the neighborhood. We speak about Berel Katzenelson living in the neighborhood. We speak about Brenner living in the neighborhood. All these are big philosophical thinkers of those times, of those days. Completely opposite of Rav Kook, non-religious, anti-religious even at times. By the way, Chaim Nachman Bialik had studied at the Volozhin Yeshiva when he was a younger boy, and turned out that he left it all and turned totally non-religious. So anyhow, Rav Kook had many discussions with these people, and that's where he figured out that we're talking about deep thinkers. We're talking about people that have ideologies. They're not nothing to share, nothing to sell. They have important merchandise, but they have it wrong with regards to religion. So he had many discussions that developed his understanding of who we're talking about. One can argue that was true back in the day, in the beginning of the 20th century, but today, no longer do we have such deep thinkers, possibly in the non-religious world, and same could also be argued for the religious world. Our thinking is not as deep as it used to be in both camps, in either camp. He also had connections with the Charedi world of those days. It was called the Yeshuva Yashan. The Yeshuva Yashan, that was the Charedi world, and the Yeshuva Chadash, the newcomers, were the non-religious. So he had good connections with them, although they weren't so keen about him because they didn't like his philosophy. They didn't like his way of explaining the Torah and explaining Emunah. Many times he was condemned very viciously and very harsh words used against him, unfortunately. But nevertheless, he remained as much as he could friendly with them, to the point that one of his greatest disputers was Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. He was the leader of the Charedi world of those days. He was like Rav Edelstein of our days, or Chaim Kanievsky of blessed memory before him. And Rav Kook was in good contact with him. Again, he didn't appreciate Rav Kook for what he stood for religiously at all, but they remained friends. And towards the end of Rav Kook's life, and Chaim Sonnenfeld's life as well, Rav Kook initiated Masa HaMoshavot, that on a horse and buggy, he took 5 or 6 rabbis, including Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, and they toured. They went from Moshava to Moshava to Moshava all around Israel, mainly in the north, where the very beginning settlements of Dgania and Kinneret and Tel Chai and all those places were being built, and the very beginning of the settlement of the Jewish people in our homeland, and they were all non-religious settlements, and they visited one after the other, tried to preach religion to them in drashos and gather them together and have them hear what the Torah has to say about what's going on. So it was a little bit naive on Rav Kook's part to think that this would change anything, and it didn't, but it was a nice attempt. There's a whole book about their journey around the country in those days. Rav Kook was a very well-rounded rabbi. He also had tremendous secular knowledge, besides his Torah knowledge of all parts of Torah, mainly philosophy, psychology. He read a lot of books from the secular world, from the Goyish world as well. At a certain stage in his life, he moved up to become the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. He moved from Yafo to Yerushalayim. Chief rabbi there he had many issues with the Yeshuva Yashan, because that's where they were mainly congregated, the Charedi people of those days, and that's where he had very difficult time with them trying to get him out, so to speaking. But nonetheless, he remained the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, and then he established the chief rabbinate of Israel. He was the first chief rabbi of Israel, establishing this whole enterprise of a chief rabbinate. He wasn't the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, but of Israel. He passed away in 1935, so he wasn't zoche in America to see the state actually happen. Amongst other developments, he started the Yeshivat Merkaz Arav, which runs till today with hundreds of students yearly, annually, joining the yeshiva. With his perspective of Judaism, of Torah, of current events, that's what they're taught. Students of Merkaz Harav are taught Merkaz Harav, Rav Kook. It's named after him. In Israel, when you say Harav, it's Rav Kook, it's not Rav Soloveitchik, as it is in other areas of the world, right? And then many other ideas, initiatives that he began. And besides tremendous vast amount of writings, mainly he's known and famous for his writings in Jewish philosophy. That's what we take mostly from him. He has also many books on responsa and explaining the Shas and things of that sort, but his expertise and his uniqueness is mainly around these areas of philosophy, Jewish philosophy. Okay, so that's sort of the background. By the way, he's buried in Har Zeitim, Rav Kook. Okay, so that's for the introduction on who Rav Kook was.